Yeah, we went out for the pre-launch. It's called a rotating service structure, RSS rollback. It's the structure there to the left.
What can you do typically when you have a scene like this?
Well, what we first do is we balance for the black level, and then establish the white level. And we're using, of course, DaVinci Resolve, and we're very familiar with DaVinci.
So you're balancing the colors a little bit just to try to get it a little less green or whatever, and then you're adding contrast. Boy, the resolution is really there. Look at that. You can see the grain just popping out of the screen. So we did this in 4K, is that correct?
Yes, this is a 4K.
And do you think that 16 millimeter really is lends itself to 4K?
2.5K is actually a little bit better of a fit. 4K doesn't show any more resolution. You get to see all of the resolution of the film. So 2.5K is a little bit better of a fit. 35 millimeter is a nice fit for 4K. Now let's see. I was present at the astronaut walkout. That morning. Let's see, an STS-71, I was at the astronaut.
That night show, oh, that's all really cool.
Yeah. There's Hoot Gibson and a Russian cosmonaut, and they were going to the Mir space station. There's Nancy Curry, and they're getting on the Astrovan. And this was actually, it was a rainy day. You can sort of see that sort of thing. And they didn't actually launch on this particular day, but they did go out and get set up in the space shuttle. It was scrubbed on this particular day.
They had to scrub it.
Yes, for weather. That does happen occasionally, but then, it's a very historic spot. All the Apollo astronauts, walked out there going to the moon, and, you've seen it on television when you're actually there. That's called the Operations and Checkout Building, O&C, and that's where the crew quarters are located, and very impressive to see. And this again is the same thing. Take a look at this zoom. You see with the standard production lens of 12 to 120, 10x zoom, and then we put the 50x Nikon still camera telephoto, like what birders would use.
Right.
And that plus the essential doubling effect of putting it on a 16 millimeter camera instead of a 35 means we're really nicely set up for that. This is the other angle to try to make things look as nice as they can look, and then try to richen up the color by using luminance gamma. That always helps. This is the launch of STS-70 in July 1995, and I shot this 16 millimeter film through a 500 millimeter Nikon still lens, so it's a half meter, it's equivalent of a 1 meter telescope. And I used my old boss's Eclair NPR from the University of Georgia. And you can see the distance at 3.5 miles trying to focus.
That was a challenge.
It really was a challenge. And you need to have the special, the kind of sports or auto racing kind of tripods and so on, not standard production tripods.
So he was shooting video there.
It's shooting video, Betacam, and I'm shooting 16 millimeter film with
With an Eclair?
With an Eclair NPR.
Got it.
Belonged to Clayton Sanders of Channel 8.
So it's 16, regular 16?
Regular 16 from 3.5 miles away. This is at the press site of the Launch Complex 39 Kennedy Space Center. And this was a mission to launch TDRS satellite, tracking data and relay satellite, into orbit, which it successfully did. And I got to ask a question at the post-landing press conference about their capabilities, because this was also the inaugural flight of the new Mission Control Center. Solid rocket motors are towed back into shore. There are two ships, Liberty Star and Freedom Star, that are about 150 miles down range. And
so they recovered them that quickly.
And they recover them in the next morning. They come back to port. And I didn't realize the exact time they were coming in, so I just had time to grab the camera. I didn't even have a tripod. So
really, you just handheld
it was, because it was like, oh well, here it is.
Oh,
if I go back from my car, then we're done.
So each one of those was theoretically reusable.
Well, they were emptied, sent back to Utah, where they were manufactured and refueled, and used on subsequent missions. The Space Shuttle orbiter was never the problem. It was either the external foam on the external tank, in the case of Columbia, or the booster field joint between the sections of the solid rocket motor. That was the issue on Challenger. But they eventually fixed it. They had heaters, and they had additional protocols for. This is inside the vehicle assembly building. At one time, the largest building in the world by volume, and it was used originally to stack the Saturn V moon rockets back during the moon program. So anyway, with the Da Vinci, we have all kinds of color grading possibilities, and we're very experienced in knowing how to get the best out of material, no matter what its condition, whether it be historical material or new material or something in between. And it's part of it is knowing what to do, and more importantly, what not to do.
So you're grading this in 4K right now?
That's correct. This is in what is more closely to what's called UHD,
right?
Which is ultra high definition, slightly narrower than cinematic 4K. Although to the general public, sometimes they don't make that distinction.